So I wanted to speak a little bit about the application of psychedelics for emotional and existential distress at the end of life, or with someone with a very serious and life-threatening illness. Many people have maybe reading about the psychedelic work within palliative care. Prior to my being a psychedelic therapist, I've worked in palliative care for many years and co-founded a palliative care center at Bellevue Hospital. And while there are many clinical indications being used now in clinical trials with psilocybin in America, um, many people don't know, and I'm sure many do know, that the first two indications to be used, to be looked at in the 1960s and 50s, one was alcoholism, and the other was the emotional anguish of having terminal cancer. And so we've really built upon the foundation those early pioneers have set with some incredible groundbreaking studies in the early days with people like Stan Groff and Bill Richards and Walter Pahnke, administering LSD at a high dose to achieve that mystical experience, or peak experience, to help reduce the tremendous and significant emotional, existential, spiritual suffering that often or can accompany someone with a life-threatening disease or at the end of life. So building upon those trials, we've recently completed 3 clinical trials at UCLA, Johns Hopkins, and NYU, looking at a moderate to high dose of psilocybin and attempting to relieve people who are with advanced cancer, some moderate cancer, but mostly advanced cancer, to relieve the emotional anguish. And the recent 2 studies at Hopkins and NYU showed that one single dose of psilocybin, moderate to high dose, did dramatically reduce depression, anxiety. At NYU, it showed a reduced hopelessness and demoralization rapidly, and also it sustained for a period of time to the end of the trial. And a follow-up contact 4.5 years later for the survivors, because many have since passed away, those effects were still sustained. The reduction in anxiety, demoralization, hopelessness, and depression. So why are these results so positive? And my personal insight is, or feeling is, that and I do think we're going to see the best results. Best is not a great word to use in the scientific language, but we're going to see these positive results with this population because it seems the transpersonal state or the altered state that psychedelics generate is typically, even in a healthy person, touching on these themes of death, of impermanence, of grief, of mourning. It seems that that's a relatively common experience, at least in part, for people to have when under the influence of a psychedelic, even if not for the cause of that they have a life-threatening disease. So to me, it seems as though consciousness, whatever that is, when we enter it in a kind of a more open way during this temporary opening that the medicine can really facilitate, or other avenues can, like meditation and spiritual practice, it often brings us into these themes and insights about death or dying. So for that reason, we've seen really positive results in these trials. And I do think that psychedelics in palliative care and in hospice will likely be one of the more positive and profound implications of these medicines, because they address this normative existential challenge for all of us. What are we doing here? What is death? Where are we going? Where do we come from? All the big questions that we're all thinking about during this life. And these transpersonal states that psychedelics generate can often, when done in proper set and setting, kind of generate those questions and provide some insight. So um, I'm very, very optimistic about the use of psilocybin and other agents, hopefully, in hospice, palliative care, and people who are even young and contending with a very difficult illness, a diagnosis that may alter the trajectory, their emotional journey with the illness. Now, some people have asked, does it affect the actual illness itself? And that was not the reason why we do this research. We didn't expect it to affect the cancer, particularly in a person who's advanced illness. But it's interesting that there's one question that comes up, and I think it's an interesting theme. Um, there's a field called psychoneuroimmunology where it's a brilliant field where it addresses the interface of our emotional life, our psychological life, and our physical health. So just as we know, to be healthy and reduce stress and meditation and all that could affect our life and maybe our longevity, um, could these experiences early on in the course of an illness have some effect? We don't know. There's no evidence it does that yet, but the important thing is that people are reducing their emotional anguish. Uh, and of course, that will have an effect on how they're feeling in their body and their physical health as well, just even subjective, but not literally the cancer markers. So anyway, I'm really optimistic about this, and I hope some of the class who's listening to this will pursue the application of these medicines in palliative care and hospice care as we go forward. And it's really a valuable gift for the field.